Hey there, ready for another deep dive? We're diving into Indian history today, and it looks like we're using a really interesting method to learn English at the same time.
Oh, yeah, using the Learning English Through Indian History podcast. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, what a cool concept. So you mentioned that you want to be able to talk about India, like its history, both the ancient past and also what's going on today, with more confidence.
That's right.
So today, we're going to give you this crash course on all the highlights of Indian history. Where should we begin?
Well, I think the best place to start is at the very beginning,
Okay, so let's go way back to 2500 BCE.
to the Indus Valley Civilization.
Yeah. Now, when we think about ancient civilizations, we don't always picture something very sophisticated, but these were people living in cities, like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro.
Yeah, these were cities with streets laid out in grids, even drainage systems. Imagine that. Urban planning over 4,000 years ago.
That's incredible.
It's remarkable, isn't it? These were thriving urban centers that rivaled, in some ways, surpassed urban planning in other parts of the world for centuries to come.
Wow.
And it wasn't just a blip on the radar of history. The Indus Valley Civilization tells us that India has a history of complex societies stretching back millennia.
It really puts things in perspective, right? I mean, their achievements way back then kind of make you wonder what we could accomplish today if we set our minds to it.
Exactly. It speaks to the incredible potential that unfolds when people work together and innovate. And speaking of innovation and grand visions, I think that leads us perfectly to another fascinating chapter, the Maurya Empire.
So we're moving from bustling cities to this vast empire, and this is where we meet this ruler, Emperor Ashoka. His story is almost too incredible to believe. He starts his reign as this fierce warrior, but then something happens.
A true story of transformation. After witnessing the devastation of war firsthand, Ashoka renounces violence, embraces Buddhism, and dedicates his rule to spreading peace and compassion.
Wow. So we can almost picture him going from this mighty warrior to this champion of peace, using his influence to, like, encourage understanding and kindness.
Right, and it's a really powerful story, almost like something out of a legend, right?
Yeah.
And like all good legends, Ashoka's story has this powerful message. His influence, it wasn't confined within India's borders. Ashoka's support helped spread Buddhist teachings far and wide, leaving a lasting impact on millions of people across various cultures and continents.
So an emperor's change of heart influencing the course of history and philosophy.
Exactly.
Wow, that's quite a legacy. But why does his story still matter to us today? What makes Ashoka such a pivotal figure in understanding India, both its past and even its present?
Well, I think Ashoka really exemplifies how a leader's personal beliefs can shape not just laws, but an entire civilization's culture.
Yeah.
His embrace of Buddhist principles influenced everything from art and architecture to social welfare initiatives. In fact, he actually established hospitals for both people and animals throughout his empire,
Oh, wow.
which was pretty revolutionary for the time. And this dedication to the welfare of all beings, I think that speaks to the enduring power of ideas to transform societies.
That's amazing. It's incredible to think how one person's like commitment to peace could have such a ripple effect throughout history.
Yeah, it's really something. And you know what's interesting is that those riffles, they kind of reach into the story of India's journey toward independence centuries later.
Oh, good point.
Yeah,
So we're fast forwarding quite a bit here to the Indian freedom struggle, 1857 to 1947.
right.
This is when we see all these movements fighting for independence from British rule.
Exactly.
And I have to wonder, did the ideals of peace and justice that Ashoka championed so long ago, did they have any influence on these movements?
You're picking up on a really fascinating thread there. I mean, obviously they're separated by centuries, but the echoes of Ashoka's emphasis on peace and justice, they can be felt in the philosophy of nonviolent resistance that Gandhi championed during the struggle for independence.
Yeah, Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha.
Exactly.
It means truth force.
Yes, truth force.
And that takes incredible courage, standing up to this empire without using violence. It really makes you think about the power of peaceful resistance.
It really does. Gandhi, he believed that true strength wasn't about mirroring the tactics of your oppressors, but resisting them without becoming like them. And this message, it resonated so deeply, not just within India, but globally.
It did.
Yeah.
So, besides Gandhi, who are some of the other key figures we should know about from this era?
Well, it's important to remember that the freedom struggle, it wasn't a monolithic movement. There were many different perspectives, different approaches, like take Subhas Chandra Bose, for instance.
Okay.
He believed in complete and immediate independence. And he even sought support from the Axis powers during World War II.
Wow, the Axis powers. That's a really bold move. It just goes to show how complex the situation was. And all the different opinions on how to achieve independence.
Absolutely. And then there was Jawaharlal Nehru, who became India's first prime minister after independence.
Right.
He played a crucial role in shaping this newly independent nation, its policies, its direction.
Right.
And I think what's important to take away from all of this is that the freedom struggle, it wasn't about just one leader, one approach, but a whole tapestry of voices, strategies, sacrifices.
So if we're trying to distill, like, what are the biggest takeaways from this period? What would you say rises to the top?
I think it's crucial to recognize that the path to freedom, to self-determination, it's rarely simple.
Right.
The Indian freedom struggle, it embodies this complexity, the debates, the ideologies, the internal struggles that were happening alongside this larger fight for independence.
Right.
It reminds us that progress often involves challenging these deeply held beliefs, navigating all these diverse perspectives.
That is a powerful takeaway. And it makes me think about how these struggles for freedom and self-determination, they often involve language as a really key element.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean, we're using English right now to have this discussion.
That's right.
And in your notes, you mentioned that English is actually the third most spoken language in the world.
It is.
That's incredible, especially considering that it wasn't always this global language. It's a
Right.
fascinating journey how it spread.
Yeah, the spread of English, it's really deeply intertwined with history, especially the history of colonization. And in India's case, British rule played a huge role in the introduction and adoption of English.
So English became kind of like this common language during that time,
Ex-
like a way to bridge the communication gap between the British administration and the diverse linguistic groups within India, right? It became this shared language, this lingua franca. And it's interesting because by definition, a lingua franca is something that's adopted from somewhere else, often out of necessity as much as anything else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Language is so often a reflection of power dynamics and cultural exchange. And, in the case of English in India, it served as the language of administration, education, even just high society during British rule.
So it really became interwoven with Indian society, even as the movement for independence was gaining momentum.
Exactly. And that's what makes the story of language so interesting. It's always evolving. It reflects these changing cultural and political landscapes. Just like India itself, English in India has become this unique blend, borrowing words, phrases from Hindi, from other Indian languages, creating this really hybrid form of communication.
Yeah, that's a cool illustration of how language is never static. It's always adapting and evolving.
Absolutely. And that evolution is still happening today. Think about how Indian English has even contributed unique words and phrases to global English. Words like bungalow, shampoo, those have roots in Indian languages.
It's true, and it just shows how these linguistic connections, they really highlight the lasting impact of cultural exchange, even across centuries.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? We started with ancient civilizations, went through powerful empires, talked about movements of peace, the evolution of language, and it all kind of comes back to this interconnectedness, this tapestry of human experience.
I know, we've only scratched the surface of this incredibly rich history.
I know, right?
But I think even in this short exploration, we've seen these ideas, these legacies that resonate far beyond just ancient texts and dates.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about history. It's not just about the past. It's about understanding who we are now and even who we might become in the future.
That's a good point. Before we wrap up, was there any one thing, any particular insight or story that really stood out to you during our dive into Indian history?
I think what really gets me is just the sheer scale of influence that Indian civilization has had on the world. We're talking advancements in math, astronomy, innovations in governance, philosophy, the impact of Indian thought, Indian innovation. It's been felt across continents for millennia, and it really just shows how interconnected we all are.
That's a really powerful thought. From ancient cities to the evolution of language itself, India's story is this vibrant reminder of human resilience, creativity, and our interconnectedness across time and cultures.
It's a story that's still being written too.
So true. Well, to our listener, we'll leave you with this. What event in Indian history do you think has had the most significant impact on our world today? Think about it. Talk about it. You might discover some really fascinating connections of your own. Until next time, keep exploring.